When you reach the age of 60, the story of your bones begins to change in a way that is subtle at first, yet deeply impactful over the years. Bones are living tissues constantly being broken down and rebuilt in a cycle known as bone remodeling. In youth and middle age, the balance between bone breakdown and bone rebuilding is finely tuned, ensuring that bone strength remains steady. But as the years pass, that balance shifts. The body's ability to build bone cannot keep pace with the rate of bone loss, and density begins to decline. This natural process is part of aging, but it is far from the whole picture. For many people, bone fragility after 60 is not only about time, but also about lifestyle factors, dietary patterns, and hidden habits that accelerate weakness. At this age, one of the primary drivers of bone loss is the decline in hormones. In women, the most dramatic example is the drop in estrogen after menopause. Estrogen is protective to bones because it helps slow the activity of osteoclasts, the cells responsible for breaking down bone tissue. Once estrogen levels fall, osteoclast activity increases and bone is lost more rapidly. In men, testosterone also declines gradually with age, and while the process is slower than in women, it still contributes to reduced bone density. Hormonal changes alone are enough to put bones at greater risk, but when combined with other biological changes of aging, the effect compounds. Calcium absorption is another factor that becomes less efficient after 60. In earlier years, the gut is able to absorb calcium from food and direct it to the bones with relative ease, but with aging, the intestines become less responsive to vitamin D, the critical hormone-like vitamin that facilitates calcium absorption. This means even if a person eats calcium-rich foods, the body may not capture and utilize it effectively. A plate of leafy greens or a glass of milk that once offered sufficient calcium may no longer provide the same protective benefit. Without proper absorption, the bones quietly starve of the minerals they need to maintain structure and resilience. Bone fragility is not only about minerals. The protein matrix within bones, primarily made of collagen, also degrades with age. Collagen gives bones flexibility and resilience. Without it, bones would become brittle, like chalk, prone to sudden and catastrophic breaks. After 60, collagen synthesis slows down and the microarchitecture of bone weakens. This is why fractures in older adults are often more serious than in younger individuals. A hip fracture at this age can lead to long hospital stays, reduced mobility, and even life-threatening complications. But beyond the biological changes, bone health after 60 is deeply influenced by lifestyle. Physical activity is one of the strongest signals to bones that they must remain strong. Weight-bearing exercises such as walking, climbing stairs, or resistance training stimulate osteoblasts, the cells that build bone. When physical activity decreases, which is common as people retire, slow down, or avoid exercise due to aches and pains, bones lose that signal. They begin to weaken faster because the body perceives less demand for their strength. Inactivity accelerates the natural decline, making the bones more fragile than they might otherwise be. Nutrition plays an equally powerful role. Diets low in calcium, vitamin D, magnesium, and protein deprive bones of the raw materials they need to stay strong. Older adults often eat less overall, sometimes due to decreased appetite, dental issues, or the challenges of cooking for one. This reduction in nutrient intake compounds the problem of decreased absorption. Even those who eat enough may unknowingly be missing key elements, because the modern diet is often rich in processed foods and poor in micronutrients. When paired with certain daily beverage choices which may actively leach minerals or interfere with absorption, bones are set on a downward spiral of fragility. Inflammation is another hidden factor. Chronic low-grade inflammation, common in aging, disrupts the balance of bone remodeling. Inflammatory molecules stimulate osteoclasts, the bone-destroying cells, more than osteoblasts, the bone-building cells. This imbalance leads to bone thinning over time. Conditions such as arthritis, diabetes, and even obesity create inflammatory environments that worsen bone health. The body begins to fight itself, breaking down bone tissue as collateral damage in the inflammatory storm. Moreover, medication use often increases after 60, and many commonly prescribed drugs have unintended consequences for bone health. Long-term use of corticosteroids, often prescribed for inflammatory conditions, directly reduces bone density. Some medications for acid reflux reduce stomach acid, impairing calcium absorption. Others, such as certain anticonvulsants, interfere with vitamin D metabolism. Even medications intended to protect other aspects of health can inadvertently weaken bones, making vigilance all the more necessary. What is most concerning is how these different factors converge. Reduced hormones, decreased calcium absorption, loss of collagen, reduced activity, chronic inflammation, and medications all intersect, creating a perfect storm for bone fragility. By the time many people recognize the issue, it may be too late, and a fracture or a diagnosis of osteoporosis is often the first warning sign. These fractures are not minor inconveniences. They can lead to loss of independence, long-term pain, and a dramatic decline in quality of life. Still, it is important to understand that while aging sets the stage, it is not destiny. Many of the forces that weaken bones can be slowed, managed, or even reversed with the right strategies. Strong nutrition, regular exercise, careful management of medications, and awareness of hidden dietary dangers can make the difference between frailty and resilience. And perhaps most overlooked of all are the everyday beverages people consume, often without realizing that they carry compounds capable of eroding bone health day after day. After 60, maintaining bone strength is no longer about simply preventing fractures. It is about preserving independence, mobility, and vitality. A strong skeleton supports every aspect of life, walking confidently, carrying groceries, enjoying time with grandchildren, and avoiding the slippery slope that begins with a single fall. To safeguard this, one must understand not only the biology of aging, but also the hidden threats in ordinary routines. And among those, the drinks we reach for daily play a surprisingly powerful role, often tipping the balance quietly against our bones without ever drawing attention to themselves. When most people think about nutrition and bone health, the mind instantly goes to food: leafy greens for calcium, dairy for protein, nuts and seeds for minerals. Rarely does anyone stop to consider the glass in their hand, the cup they sip in the morning, or the bottled drink they purchase out of convenience. Yet beverages are far more than a source of hydration or taste. They are chemical messengers that enter the body quickly, spread rapidly through the bloodstream, and influence countless cellular processes within minutes. Unlike solid food, which undergoes more complex digestion, drinks are absorbed with astonishing speed, making their impact both subtle and powerful. This is why beverages can become silent players in the drama of bone loss, exerting effects that accumulate day after day without drawing much attention. The challenge with beverages is that they are often perceived as harmless. A soda here, a cup of coffee there, a glass of wine at dinner, a splash of fruit juice in the morning. None of these seem threatening in isolation. They are routine comforts, woven into the fabric of daily life, so familiar that most people never pause to evaluate them. But it is precisely this routine consumption that makes them influential. Over months and years, what seems small compounds into patterns that erode the body's capacity to maintain bone density. Unlike dramatic injuries which announce themselves instantly, the slow leaching of minerals and disruption of bone metabolism from beverages is invisible. By the time the consequences appear, a fracture, a stooped posture, or a diagnosis of osteoporosis, the damage has already accumulated silently. One of the ways beverages affect bone health is through their acid-base balance. The human body tightly regulates blood pH, but certain drinks contain acids or compounds that, once metabolized, increase the body's acid load. When this happens, the body pulls alkaline minerals like calcium and magnesium from bones to neutralize the excess acidity. It is an elegant survival mechanism, but one that comes at a steep cost when repeated daily. Over decades, this steady drain weakens bone mineral density. The irony is that the very drinks consumed for refreshment or pleasure can force the skeleton to sacrifice itself to maintain chemical balance in the blood. Another pathway through which drinks harm bones is mineral interference. Many popular beverages contain substances that either block the absorption of calcium or accelerate its excretion. Caffeine, for example, is a mild diuretic, increasing calcium loss through urine. Phosphoric acid, found in many sodas, competes directly with calcium, disturbing the ratio required for healthy bone formation. Alcohol, beyond impairing balance and increasing the risk of falls, interferes with vitamin D activation in the liver, which in turn reduces calcium absorption from the gut. Even fruit juices, marketed as natural, can contain sugar loads that spike insulin and inflammation, both of which weaken the delicate balance of bone remodeling. Each of these effects might appear minor on their own, but when layered together across years, they accelerate fragility. The psychology of beverage consumption also plays a role. People often underestimate the calories, sugars, or additives in liquids compared to solid food. A person who would hesitate to eat 5 tablespoons of sugar without thought may drink the equivalent in a soda without blinking. Seniors, in particular, may lean on drinks for quick energy or convenience, especially if appetite for solid meals decreases. Unfortunately, this reliance on beverages as a substitute for nutrient-dense foods worsens the problem. Instead of providing protein, vitamins, and minerals required for bone health, the drinks introduce compounds that actively strip or block them, creating a nutritional double loss. It is also important to recognize that beverage habits often begin long before 60 and carry into later life. Someone who has consumed multiple cups of coffee daily since their 20s or who has enjoyed sweetened sodas for decades has already set a trajectory for bone weakening long before the aging process compounds it. By the time they reach senior years, their bones may already be compromised, and the continued daily exposure only accelerates what has been building for decades. The bones reflect not just current habits, but the long accumulation of choices made over a lifetime, and beverages are one of the most overlooked contributors in that accumulation. Compounding the issue is the fact that many beverages displace healthier options. A soda or packaged juice at lunch may take the place of a calcium-rich glass of milk or a mineral-laden herbal infusion. A heavy reliance on coffee throughout the day may reduce water intake, leading to mild dehydration, which itself can affect nutrient transport and bone metabolism. Alcohol at night might replace a calming herbal tea that could otherwise support sleep and hormone regulation, both of which indirectly influence bone strength. In this way, beverages not only actively harm but also rob the body of beneficial inputs it could have received if different choices were made. The speed with which liquids move through the body also makes them especially potent in influencing bone biology. Sugars from juices and sodas hit the bloodstream rapidly, creating spikes in insulin and inflammatory mediators that interfere with bone-building cells. Alcohol travels quickly to the liver, disrupting vitamin D pathways. Caffeine reaches peak blood levels within an hour, triggering diuresis and calcium loss. Because of this rapid bioavailability, drinks can cause acute shifts in internal chemistry that, when repeated daily, accumulate into long-term skeletal fragility. Unlike solid meals, which take longer to digest and spread their impact more gradually, drinks hit hard and fast, producing repeated shocks to the body's equilibrium. What makes beverages uniquely deceptive is the cultural context around them. Coffee is celebrated as a morning ritual, wine as a symbol of relaxation and sophistication, sodas as refreshing treats, and fruit juices as symbols of health. These narratives make it harder for people to see the hidden downsides. Few individuals would knowingly harm their bones, yet they may do so every day under the influence of these cultural associations. Even health campaigns often focus on reducing sugar for the sake of diabetes or limiting alcohol for liver health, but rarely emphasize the skeletal consequences. As a result, bone loss continues quietly in the background, unrecognized until it manifests as something serious. The silent role of beverages in bone loss also intersects with the broader concept of inflammation and aging. Many drinks, especially those high in sugars or alcohol, trigger systemic inflammation, which has a destructive effect on osteoblasts, the bone-building cells. When inflammation becomes chronic, as it often does with aging, the body shifts its priorities away from growth and repair, including the repair of bone. Over time, the inflammatory effects of drinks merge with the natural inflammatory state of aging, compounding the decline in skeletal resilience. Equally concerning is how these drinks interact with medications. Many older adults are prescribed drugs that already have side effects on bone metabolism. For example, proton pump inhibitors reduce stomach acid and impair calcium absorption. Corticosteroids weaken bone density with prolonged use. Adding daily beverages that further impair calcium balance or bone cell function creates a dangerous synergy. The drinks do not act in isolation. They amplify the risks already present, making the bones even more vulnerable. Ultimately, the influence of beverages on bone health after 60 is one of the most overlooked yet impactful aspects of aging. They are silent because they rarely announce their effects immediately. There is no pain, no warning sign, no dramatic shift after a single cup or glass. Instead, the weakening happens quietly, day after day, as calcium is lost, absorption is blocked, and inflammation is stoked. By the time the results surface, the skeleton may already be compromised, leaving individuals to wonder how something so ordinary and familiar could have played such a destructive role in their health. Sugary soft drinks are among the most common beverages consumed worldwide, and yet their impact on the human body is more insidious than many realize. For people over the age of 60, these drinks represent a particularly dangerous threat to bone health, because they strike at multiple layers of skeletal biology. On the surface, they may seem like harmless pleasures, a way to enjoy a sweet taste with a meal, or refresh oneself on a hot day. However, beneath that sweetness lies a complex interaction of sugar, acid, and additives that quietly undermines the very structure of bones. Understanding how and why sugary sodas weaken bones is crucial, especially for seniors who may already be facing the natural decline in bone density that comes with aging. One of the most critical elements in this relationship is phosphoric acid, a compound found in many colas and carbonated drinks. While it provides the tangy flavor that consumers expect, it has a hidden cost. Phosphoric acid increases the acid load in the bloodstream, forcing the body to buffer that acidity in order to maintain stable blood pH. The most readily available buffer in the body is calcium, and when dietary sources are not immediately accessible, the body draws calcium directly from bones. This process is not noticeable in the short term, but over months and years of regular consumption, the leaching of calcium leads to measurable decreases in bone mineral density. Seniors are particularly vulnerable because their bodies already struggle with calcium absorption due to age-related changes in the gut and reduced vitamin D efficiency, making every additional demand on calcium supply more damaging. The sugar content of these drinks compounds the problem. Soft drinks often contain 30 to 40 grams of added sugar per serving, sometimes even more. This creates spikes in blood sugar and insulin, both of which increase inflammation throughout the body. Chronic inflammation is one of the most destructive forces for bones because it tilts the balance of bone remodeling toward breakdown rather than rebuilding. Osteoclasts, the cells that degrade bone, are stimulated by inflammatory markers, while osteoblasts, the cells that build bone, are suppressed. Over time, the skeletal system falls into a state where breakdown outpaces repair, leaving bones thinner and more fragile. For seniors who already face a natural slowdown in bone rebuilding, the added inflammatory burden from sugary drinks accelerates decline in ways that can be catastrophic. There's also the issue of displacement. When someone drinks soda, they are usually not drinking a calcium-rich or bone-supportive beverage in its place. For example, a glass of soda at lunch might replace a glass of milk, fortified plant-based milk, or even water infused with minerals. In this way, sugary drinks not only harm actively, but also rob the body of potential nourishment it could have received. Seniors often consume fewer calories overall due to smaller appetites, so each dietary choice matters more. Choosing soda over nutrient-dense options creates a double deficit. Harmful acids and sugars enter the body while protective minerals and proteins are absent. This consistent displacement contributes to nutrient gaps that leave bones increasingly unsupported. Soft drinks also contain caffeine in many cases, especially colas and energy sodas. Caffeine, though mild compared to coffee, has a diuretic effect that increases urinary calcium excretion. Even modest daily losses of calcium add up over the course of years. Consider a person in their 60s who has 1 or 2 sodas per day. That may seem trivial, but it represents a persistent drain on calcium stores that are already fragile. Combined with the acidic environment and sugar load, the effect becomes a triple assault on bone health. Research supports these observations. Studies comparing soda drinkers to non-drinkers consistently show lower bone mineral density in the hips and spine of those who consume soft drinks regularly. In some large population studies, women who drank more than one cola per day had significantly higher rates of osteoporosis than those who avoided them. While correlation does not prove causation, the biological mechanisms linking phosphoric acid, sugar, caffeine, and calcium loss make the connection difficult to dismiss. Seniors, especially postmenopausal women, appear to be most vulnerable to these effects because of the sharp hormonal changes that already accelerate bone loss. Another overlooked aspect of sugary drinks is how they contribute to obesity and metabolic syndrome, conditions that indirectly affect bone health. Excess body fat, particularly visceral fat, is metabolically active and produces inflammatory cytokines that damage bones over time. Obesity also increases the risk of falls and fractures because of mobility issues. Ironically, while one might assume carrying extra weight could strengthen bones due to increased load, the inflammatory environment created by obesity actually leads to weaker bones. Sugary soft drinks, by driving weight gain and metabolic disturbances, indirectly undermine the skeletal system beyond their direct biochemical effects. There is also the behavioral dimension to consider. People who regularly consume soft drinks often maintain other dietary patterns that are less supportive of bone health. High soda consumption correlates with lower intake of fruits, vegetables, and dairy products, all essential sources of vitamins and minerals for bone. Seniors may develop lifelong habits around these beverages, carrying forward patterns established in youth. In retirement, when routines shift and physical activity often decreases, maintaining these habits can amplify the decline in bone density. The culture of treating soda as a harmless treat persists, masking its hidden long-term effects. Hydration is another subtle angle. Soda is not an effective hydrator. In fact, the combination of caffeine, sugar, and acidity can dehydrate the body rather than replenish it. Dehydration impairs nutrient transport and reduces the efficiency of cellular processes, including those involved in bone remodeling. Seniors are already at greater risk for dehydration because of a reduced thirst response with age, so relying on sodas for fluid intake worsens this risk. Adequate hydration with water or mineral-rich alternatives is essential for bone metabolism, making soda consumption doubly harmful. Even the carbonation itself has been questioned. While carbonation in isolation may not directly harm bones, the association of carbonated drinks with acids, sugars, and caffeine means that bubbles rarely come without baggage. Some evidence suggests that carbonation can contribute to bloating and digestive discomfort, leading people to reduce intake of bone-supportive foods. Whether or not carbonation is a direct culprit, it travels with companions that clearly harm bone health. In many ways, sugary soft drinks represent the perfect storm for bone fragility. Acidic compounds that draw calcium out of bones, sugars that inflame and suppress bone-building cells, caffeine that increases calcium loss, and displacement of healthier beverages that could provide support. Seniors who continue these habits face not just weaker bones, but also a higher risk of falls, fractures, and the cascading health problems that follow. Hip fractures in particular are notorious for reducing independence and life expectancy in older adults. While soda may seem like an insignificant factor in such outcomes, it quietly contributes to the fragility that makes these fractures possible. The most troubling element of sugary drinks is how normalized they have become. From early childhood advertisements to social gatherings, they are positioned as essential pleasures. Yet for someone over 60, each can or bottle represents more than a sweet indulgence. It is a withdrawal from the skeletal bank account at a time when deposits are already scarce. Over years, those small withdrawals accumulate into osteoporosis, frailty, and the increased likelihood of fractures that transform vibrant living into cautious survival. The damage unfolds quietly, often without awareness, until a sudden injury exposes the fragility beneath. Coffee is one of the most beloved beverages in the world, woven into daily routines as both a comfort and a source of energy. For many, it is the ritual that starts the day, the companion through work, and the moment of pause in the afternoon. Its aroma, warmth, and stimulating effect make it almost irresistible. Yet, as much as coffee has benefits for alertness, metabolism, and even certain aspects of cardiovascular health, there is a quieter, less celebrated truth about what happens when caffeine intake goes beyond moderation, especially after the age of 60. Bones, already under the stress of aging, become unintended casualties when caffeine consumption climbs too high. Excessive coffee is not immediately destructive, but its impact accumulates slowly, creating subtle disruptions in calcium balance and bone metabolism that over years can translate into weakness and fragility. The primary concern with caffeine is its effect on calcium absorption and excretion. Calcium is the cornerstone of bone health, and without a steady supply and efficient absorption, bones cannot maintain their density or strength. Research has shown that caffeine interferes with calcium absorption in the gut, reducing the efficiency with which dietary calcium enters the bloodstream. While the effect of a single cup may be small, the repetitive pattern of several cups each day across decades compounds this loss. Seniors are especially vulnerable because, with aging, the digestive system already struggles to absorb calcium efficiently due to reduced sensitivity to vitamin D. What was once a minor inconvenience in youth becomes a critical threat after 60 when every milligram of calcium counts. Beyond absorption, caffeine also accelerates calcium excretion. Acting as a mild diuretic, it increases urine output, and with it, calcium is flushed out of the body. Each cup of coffee contributes to this loss, and although the amount per cup may seem trivial, the cumulative impact of years of habitual consumption adds up to significant mineral depletion. For an older adult, losing calcium in this way is like having a leak in the foundation of a house. At first unnoticeable, but gradually destabilizing the entire structure. The skeleton silently pays the price for the comfort of each extra mug. The effects of caffeine are not limited to calcium alone. Excessive intake disrupts the balance of other minerals crucial for bone health, such as magnesium and phosphorus. Magnesium, in particular, is vital for the conversion of vitamin D into its active form, which regulates calcium absorption. When caffeine disturbs this delicate balance, the ripple effect weakens the body's ability to direct minerals where they are needed most. In essence, caffeine does not just reduce calcium levels directly, it undermines the entire supportive network of nutrients that keep bones resilient. Sleep is another pathway through which caffeine impacts bone health. After 60, sleep often becomes lighter and more fragmented due to hormonal changes and natural shifts in circadian rhythm. Deep, restorative sleep is essential for the release of growth hormone and the repair of tissues, including bone. High caffeine intake, particularly later in the day, interferes with the ability to achieve this deep rest. Chronic sleep disruption leads to higher levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. Elevated cortisol not only weakens muscles and immune function, but also accelerates bone breakdown by stimulating osteoclasts, the cells that degrade bone tissue. Thus, the relationship between caffeine, sleep, and hormones becomes another hidden thread, tying coffee habits to declining bone strength. Cultural attitudes toward coffee often amplify this risk. For many, coffee is not just a beverage but an identity. Multiple cups throughout the day are normalized, even celebrated, as a sign of productivity, social engagement, or endurance. Seniors who began drinking coffee decades ago may now find themselves drinking out of habit rather than necessity, unaware of how these cumulative intakes shape their skeletal future. The body, however, does not measure culture, it measures chemistry. Excessive caffeine remains a burden on calcium balance and bone remodeling regardless of how accepted or comforting the ritual feels. Scientific studies reinforce these concerns. Research has shown that women who consume high levels of caffeine, particularly those with lower calcium intakes, experience greater rates of bone loss and higher fracture risk. Postmenopausal women, already vulnerable due to the steep decline in estrogen, appear most affected. Men are not immune either, with studies indicating that older men who consume large quantities of coffee also face measurable declines in bone mineral density. The evidence points toward a dose-dependent relationship. Moderate coffee may not cause significant harm, but beyond 2 or 3 cups daily, the risks rise sharply. The issue of moderation is key. Coffee itself is not inherently harmful, and some studies even highlight potential benefits when consumed in small amounts, such as improved circulation, antioxidants, and reduced risk of certain chronic diseases. The problem emerges when consumption exceeds the body's ability to balance the side effects. After 60, when the systems that regulate calcium, vitamin D, and hormonal health are already less robust, the margin for excess shrinks dramatically. What might have been safe at 40 or 50 becomes a liability in later decades. Hydration status is another subtle layer to this story. Because caffeine has diuretic properties, excessive intake can lead to mild dehydration. Adequate hydration is critical for nutrient transport, joint lubrication, and cellular repair. Seniors already face a reduced sense of thirst, making them more susceptible to dehydration. When coffee displaces water or other hydrating beverages, the body struggles to maintain optimal fluid balance. This not only affects overall health, but also impairs the delivery of minerals and nutrients to bones, adding yet another indirect pathway through which coffee excess weakens skeletal integrity. It is also important to consider the additives often paired with coffee. Many seniors prefer their coffee sweetened with sugar or flavored creamers, both of which introduce additional problems. Excess sugar contributes to inflammation, the very process that accelerates bone breakdown. Artificial creamers often lack the nutrients found in real dairy or fortified alternatives, meaning they add calories without providing any supportive value for bone health. Over time, the combination of caffeine, sugar, and nutrient voids creates a cocktail that undermines the skeletal system from multiple angles. There is also the overlooked connection between caffeine and physical stability. Excessive caffeine intake can increase jitteriness, anxiety, and even cause mild tremors in sensitive individuals. For older adults, this may translate into balance problems or increased risk of falls. Since falls are the immediate trigger for fractures in many cases, the role of caffeine in increasing fall risk deserves as much attention as its impact on mineral balance. Strong bones matter, but avoiding falls is equally critical, and caffeine stimulatory side effects can erode both safety and skeletal strength simultaneously. The interaction of caffeine with medications further complicates matters. Many seniors take prescriptions for blood pressure, heart rhythm, diabetes, or mental health, and caffeine can interact with these in unpredictable ways. Some medications already alter calcium metabolism or bone density as side effects. Adding excessive caffeine to the mix can amplify risks, creating a hidden synergy that worsens fragility. The combined influence of drugs, age, and daily coffee habits places bones in an even more precarious position than any single factor alone. In essence, the relationship between coffee and bone health is not about vilifying the drink itself, but about recognizing its limits. Excessive consumption, particularly after the age of 60, creates a silent drain on calcium, magnesium, and sleep quality, while increasing excretion and inflammation. The comforting ritual of multiple cups each day slowly turns into a threat that undermines skeletal resilience. For bones that are already contending with the unavoidable changes of aging, hormonal decline, reduced absorption, slower repair, the addition of too much caffeine becomes an accelerant to fragility rather than a harmless indulgence. Alcohol has long held a complex place in human society. For some, it is a symbol of celebration, relaxation, or social bonding. A glass of wine at dinner, a beer at the end of a long day, or a cocktail shared with friends seems innocent enough. Yet beneath this cultural acceptance lies a powerful physiological reality, one that is especially damaging to the bones of older adults. After 60, when the body is already grappling with declining bone density, hormonal changes, and slower repair processes, alcohol becomes more than a casual indulgence. It becomes a subtle yet potent force that erodes skeletal strength. The effects of alcohol on bone health are not dramatic in the way that a fall or injury might be, but they are steady, cumulative, and deeply consequential. One of the most important ways alcohol undermines bone health is through its impact on osteoblasts, the bone-building cells. Osteoblasts are responsible for laying down new bone tissue, ensuring that the skeleton stays strong as older bone is naturally broken down and replaced. Excessive alcohol consumption disrupts the activity of these cells, reducing their ability to form new bone. At the same time, alcohol increases the activity of osteoclasts, the cells that break down bone tissue. This imbalance accelerates bone loss, tipping the natural cycle of bone remodeling in favor of destruction rather than renewal. Over time, this results in a skeleton that is less dense, more porous, and far more vulnerable to fractures. Alcohol also interferes with the metabolism of vitamin D, one of the most critical regulators of calcium absorption in bone health. Vitamin D is activated in the liver, and chronic alcohol use damages liver function, reducing the body's ability to convert vitamin D into its active form. Without active vitamin D, calcium from food cannot be effectively absorbed in the gut, no matter how much is consumed. For seniors, whose calcium absorption is already declining with age, this disruption is particularly dangerous. It creates a situation where bones are deprived of essential minerals, slowly losing the ability to maintain their structural integrity. In addition to affecting vitamin D, alcohol impairs calcium balance directly. Chronic alcohol consumption reduces calcium absorption in the intestines while also increasing its excretion through the kidneys. This double blow leaves the body short of the mineral it most desperately needs for bone maintenance. Even moderate drinking, when sustained over long periods, can create subtle but significant deficits. The body cannot store large reserves of calcium for long-term use. It relies on a steady supply. Alcohol disrupts that steady supply, leading the skeleton to cannibalize itself for what little calcium is available, further accelerating fragility. Another critical factor is the hormonal disruption caused by alcohol. In men, excessive drinking lowers testosterone, which is essential for maintaining bone density. In women, alcohol can interfere with estrogen balance, particularly harmful after menopause when estrogen levels are already sharply reduced. Both testosterone and estrogen are protective for bones, helping regulate the balance between bone breakdown and bone formation. When alcohol diminishes these hormones further, the skeletal system loses another layer of defense, leaving bones exposed to rapid weakening. Beyond the biochemical effects, alcohol introduces lifestyle risks that compound the problem of bone fragility. Intoxication, even at moderate levels, impairs balance, coordination, and judgment. Seniors are already at increased risk of falls due to age-related declines in muscle strength, vision, and reflexes. Alcohol magnifies these risks dramatically. A stumble that might have been avoided when sober becomes a dangerous fall under the influence. Since fractures in older adults often lead to loss of independence, hospitalization, and even mortality, alcohol's role in increasing fall risk cannot be overlooked. The danger is not only what alcohol does to bone density, but also how it increases the likelihood of accidents that expose fragile bones to injury. Alcohol also disrupts sleep, an often overlooked contributor to bone health. While it may initially act as a sedative, alcohol interferes with deep, restorative sleep cycles. Poor sleep raises cortisol levels, the body's stress hormone, which in turn accelerates bone breakdown by stimulating osteoclast activity. Chronic elevation of cortisol erodes both muscle and bone, creating a state of fragility that worsens over time. Seniors who already struggle with sleep quality find themselves further deprived of the restorative processes needed for skeletal repair when alcohol becomes a nightly habit. Inflammation is another hidden mechanism linking alcohol to bone fragility. Chronic alcohol use triggers systemic inflammation, a state where inflammatory cytokines circulate throughout the body, damaging tissues. In bones, inflammation tilts the balance of remodeling toward degradation. This effect is compounded in older adults, who often experience chronic low-grade inflammation as part of the aging process. Alcohol in this context acts as fuel on an already smoldering fire, amplifying the rate of bone breakdown. Nutritional deficiencies caused by alcohol further add to the problem. Heavy drinkers often have poor diets, either because alcohol displaces appetite or because drinking becomes prioritized over balanced meals. Even moderate alcohol use can interfere with the absorption of key nutrients, such as magnesium, zinc, and protein, all of which are vital for bone strength. Protein, for instance, forms the collagen matrix upon which minerals are deposited. Without adequate protein, bones lose their flexibility and become brittle. Alcohol's interference with nutrition leaves bones starved of the resources they need, compounding the direct damage caused by the substance itself. The social and psychological dimensions of alcohol use cannot be ignored. Many seniors turn to alcohol as a coping mechanism for loneliness, stress, or the challenges of aging. While it may provide temporary relief, the long-term consequences for bone health and overall vitality are profound. Dependence or even habitual reliance on alcohol creates a cycle where bones are weakened while the risk of falls and injuries rises. This cycle often goes unnoticed until a fracture occurs, at which point the damage has already been done. Scientific studies paint a clear picture. Research consistently shows that chronic heavy drinking is associated with osteoporosis, reduced bone mineral density, and increased fracture risk. Even moderate but consistent drinking has been linked to weaker bones, particularly in postmenopausal women and older men. The dose and duration of drinking matter. The more alcohol consumed over time, the greater the skeletal damage. Yet even low to moderate intake may be risky when layered on top of the natural vulnerabilities of aging. The cultural narrative around alcohol often emphasizes its supposed benefits, such as the antioxidants in red wine. While certain compounds may indeed provide some protective effects in moderation, these are easily overshadowed by the broader risks. The idea that alcohol is harmless or even beneficial for seniors can lull people into habits that, over years, undermine their skeletal strength. In reality, whatever small benefits alcohol might carry are outweighed by its cumulative toll on bones, hormones, balance, and nutrient absorption. In the end, alcohol represents a dual threat to bone health. It acts biochemically, interfering with the cells, hormones, and nutrients needed for bone strength, while also acting behaviorally, increasing the likelihood of falls and injuries. For individuals over 60, this dual effect is particularly dangerous because their bones are already fragile, their healing slower, and their recovery from fractures more complicated. A hip fracture caused by a fall under the influence of alcohol can mark the beginning of a permanent decline in independence and mobility. The skeleton, which should be a silent support system for life, becomes compromised not only by age, but by the hidden costs of alcohol consumption. At first glance, fruit juice appears to be a healthy choice. It's colorful, sweet, often labeled natural, and typically marketed with images of fresh oranges, apples, or berries cascading into a glass of vibrant liquid. For seniors looking to make healthier dietary decisions, switching from soda to fruit juice might seem like a step in the right direction. After all, it contains vitamins, it's made from fruit, and it doesn't have the negative stigma that surrounds soft drinks or alcohol. But hidden within these brightly packaged beverages lies a set of risks that are especially dangerous for individuals over the age of 60. When consumed regularly, packaged fruit juices can quietly undermine bone health, chipping away at the skeletal foundation from the inside out. While they may seem benign or even beneficial, these drinks contain hidden threats, primarily in the form of sugar overload, nutrient imbalances, and metabolic disruptions that make them one of the more deceptive contributors to bone weakening in later life. The first and most immediate concern with packaged fruit juices is their sugar content. Many of these beverages contain just as much sugar as soft drinks, sometimes even more, particularly when concentrated or fortified with added sweeteners to enhance flavor. An 8-ounce glass of orange juice, for example, can contain 20–30 grams of sugar, a surge that enters the bloodstream rapidly, especially when the juice lacks the fiber present in whole fruit. For older adults, such spikes in blood sugar can lead to a cascade of metabolic consequences. Elevated blood glucose triggers insulin secretion, and high insulin levels have been shown to increase inflammatory cytokines in the body. Chronic inflammation is one of the key drivers of bone loss in aging individuals. It suppresses the activity of osteoblasts, the cells responsible for building new bone, while stimulating osteoclasts, which break down bone tissue. The result is a gradual erosion of bone mineral density, compounded by repeated insulin surges that result from regular consumption of sugary juices. Equally problematic is the absence of dietary fiber in packaged juices. Whole fruits provide not only vitamins and natural sugars, but also fiber, which slows the absorption of glucose and helps maintain metabolic stability. When fruit is juiced and stripped of its fibrous matrix, the sugars become highly bioavailable, absorbed quickly into the bloodstream without any buffering. This rapid absorption leads to an immediate spike in blood sugar and a corresponding drop as insulin rushes in to bring levels back down. These fluctuations place stress on the endocrine system and contribute to systemic inflammation, which over time contributes to the degradation of bone tissue. Seniors whose insulin sensitivity may already be compromised are particularly vulnerable to these metabolic swings. In addition to their glycemic effects, fruit juices can also create imbalances in nutrient ratios essential for bone maintenance. For instance, Many juices are rich in vitamin C, which is undoubtedly beneficial for immune function and collagen production, but they are typically low in magnesium and calcium, two minerals vital for maintaining bone strength. This imbalance means that while the body may have the resources to build collagen, it lacks the minerals needed to harden the bone matrix. The illusion of nutritional adequacy is misleading. The consumer may feel they are getting a healthy beverage, but in reality, the juice lacks the full spectrum of nutrients required for effective bone remodeling. Even more troubling is the acid-forming potential of certain fruit juices. While fruits themselves are considered alkaline-forming once metabolized, the concentrated sugars and lack of balancing minerals in juices can lead to an acidic internal environment. The body, in its effort to neutralize this acidity, may draw on alkaline reserves such as calcium from the bones. This leaching process gradually depletes bone mineral content, especially if the dietary intake of calcium and magnesium is already low. Over time, this constant buffering leads to thinner bones that are more prone to fracture. Sodium is another hidden ingredient in many commercial fruit juices, especially blends and cocktails marketed for long shelf life. While sodium itself is not inherently harmful in moderation, excess intake can promote calcium loss through the kidneys. In older adults who may already be consuming a high sodium diet due to processed foods or certain medications, fruit juices add to the total burden. This cumulative effect can increase urinary calcium excretion, leaving bones more vulnerable to mineral loss even if dietary calcium intake appears sufficient on the surface. Furthermore, many packaged juices are pasteurized to extend shelf life, a process that involves heating the liquid to high temperatures to kill bacteria and microbes. While necessary for safety, this heat treatment can degrade heat-sensitive vitamins and phytonutrients that would otherwise support bone health. Compounds such as flavonoids and polyphenols, naturally present in fresh fruits, often lose potency or are destroyed altogether during processing. These compounds are known to have anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects that protect osteoblasts and promote bone formation. With these nutrients diminished or absent, the juice loses much of its original protective potential, becoming more of a sweet beverage than a true health elixir. Artificial additives, preservatives, and colorings further complicate the picture. Many commercially available juices contain chemical stabilizers and flavor enhancers designed to improve texture, color, and shelf stability. These compounds may have unintended effects on gut health, immune function, and inflammation, each of which plays a role in bone metabolism. A healthy gut is crucial for nutrient absorption, especially calcium, magnesium, and vitamin D. Disruption of the microbiome through regular exposure to preservatives can impair absorption and weaken the body's ability to build and maintain bone. The psychological perception of juice as healthy also leads to overconsumption. Seniors may feel confident drinking multiple servings per day, unaware of the cumulative sugar and acid load. Unlike soda or alcohol, which carry warning reputations, fruit juices are often promoted as part of a balanced diet. This false sense of security leads to habits that may appear health-conscious on the surface, but in reality undermine long-term well-being. For someone already facing age-related declines in bone mass, this can be a costly mistake. Moreover, fruit juices are often consumed in place of water or herbal teas that would support hydration without the added sugars or acidity. Hydration plays a key role in maintaining the health of cartilage and intervertebral discs, structures that indirectly support bone function. Dehydration can impair nutrient transport, slow the removal of metabolic waste from bone cells, and reduce circulation to bone-forming areas. By choosing juices instead of pure water or mineral-infused beverages, seniors may inadvertently deprive their skeletal system of one of its most basic needs: clean, hydrating fluid. It's also worth considering the behavioral context in which juices are consumed. Breakfast, for example, is one of the most common times for juice intake. Yet many seniors skip protein or calcium-rich foods in the morning, opting instead for toast, cereal, and juice. This leaves the bones without the amino acids, minerals, and healthy fats needed to support early morning bone remodeling. The juice may deliver a quick energy boost, but it comes at the cost of long-term skeletal resilience. Over months and years, this nutrient gap grows wider, especially when no conscious effort is made to replace what is lost. There is also a seasonal dimension. During summer or festive periods, juice consumption often increases dramatically. Chilled juices served at gatherings, brunches, or as part of family traditions can become a primary beverage, especially when perceived as a better alternative to soda. However, these periods of high intake, even if temporary, can have lasting effects if they coincide with other periods of poor diet, inactivity, or increased medication use. For aging individuals, bones that are already compromised may not recover quickly from these brief but intense metabolic insults. The idea that something as seemingly wholesome as fruit juice could harm bones may seem counterintuitive, but the science is clear. The removal of fiber, the concentration of sugars, the addition of preservatives, and the loss of protective phytochemicals all create a drink that, while sweet and convenient, acts more like a metabolic stressor than a nutritional ally. It is this deceptive nature, appearing healthy while acting in opposition to bone maintenance, that makes packaged fruit juices particularly dangerous for people over 60. When bones are already vulnerable due to natural aging, these beverages add another layer of risk that is often entirely preventable through better informed choices.